I went through a period in my life where I was like literally just devouring self-development books, and I really needed to at that time. Like I was just really ripping through them. And it's interesting how certain books can present at the time you kind of need them. Um, and it sort of became a thing to me where I was like, maybe I need to challenge myself actually to read other books than self-development. And I started reading a lot of biographies and things, but I don't know, I'm just drawn to those, which sounds like you are too. How important have they been to you on your
Yeah,
journey?
it's my entire life. Everything changed for me 10 years ago when I got into this industry of what I call nonfiction. So I also read a lot of biographies, traditional business books, but a lot of self-help and personal development, fitness, diet, nutrition, philosophy, psychology. Like I love all of it.
Do you like the kind of model, where people strip them down for you, or do you need to read the book in its entirety? What's your preference?
Need to read the book in its entirety.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
There's a great book by Joshua Waitskin, former chess champion, also mixed martial arts champion. And he talks about form to leave form, or numbers to leave numbers, where you study something so intensely that it becomes part of your subconscious. And that's when you truly understand information. And when your subconscious can identify opportunities to act on your behalf. And you can't get that from a book summary.
Yeah, no, you have to dive right in. How can you have have you got like a top three or a top five of ones that have been really impactful to you?
Yeah, the first book that I ever read was Rich Dad Poor Dad by
Mm.
Robert Kiyosaki. And we could talk about all of the lessons from that book if you want, but that's book number one. Number two, I think the second book that's had the biggest impact on my life is The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. That's created the life that I live today, which I'm in love with. And I love to shout from the rooftops like what I've got going on because it's all been designed to fit my unique lifestyle and what I'm looking to get out of life. And then number three, there's so many good books. I'll say The Alchemist by Paulo
Mm.
Coelho.
Yeah, that one comes up a lot. That's a classic, no doubt about it. Yeah, the Rich Dad Poor Dad. No, I read The Richest Man in Babylon.
That's a good
That's
one. George S.
yeah,
Clay. Yeah.
yeah. Perhaps touching on some similar themes, but yeah, the 4 hour work week. I haven't read that, but I get the premise. This is essentially like this model of doing, you know, lengthy hours and so on is not necessarily the most productive way to work. When you find your alignment with things, you can be much more productive, putting in less, which is a really hard. It's taken me a long time to grasp that. Is that essentially one of the themes in that one?
Yeah, there are a couple of major themes. Number one, just like you're talking about, the book helps you sort of escape the 9 to 5 mindset that you need to put in 40 hours a week of of boring, monotonous work for somebody else in order to live a life. You can design something that's more uniquely fulfilling to you. And that can happen by identifying the activities in your workload that have more leverage, the 20% that create 80% of the results. And then you can automate, delegate, or eliminate the rest because it's mostly meaningless work, right? The busy work stuff. And in today's day and age, you have virtual assistants, you have platforms like Upwork and Fiverr, where you can hire people all over the world for less than what you're charging per hour to take care of your work for you. And so, yeah, it helps you free up time. But the other major theme in that book is that given today's environment, you can also design a life that's fulfilling to you. You don't have to work a job that you hate. You can build a job that you love. And so that book got me out of the standard 9 to 5. It got me building my own business and traveling the world. I've spent time in 25 different countries over the last 5 years as a result of reading that book. So that's what it's done for me.
Yeah, amazing. The How did the book thinkers come about?
So when I was in college, I had just discovered this world of personal development books. And one of the early books that I read with one of my friends was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And one of the concepts in that book is the idea of a mastermind, the idea that two people in the same room focused on solving a problem almost creates like a third mind, right? There's this like intangible energy that's formed. And so we thought that was a cool idea. So we started to meet on weekends on the university campus and just chat about business ideas. Like, what could we do to start a business after we graduate? And what we learned about business was that businesses solve problems. So we came every single weekend with all the problems that we could find listed out. Didn't matter how small they were. And one weekend, I remember I walked in and I'm like, you know what, man? Everybody keeps asking me the same questions about these books, because I had really started sharing all of the books I was reading everywhere I could. Like, it became my personality almost overnight. And I thought, there should be a website maybe where I list all of my favorite takeaways from the books I'm reading. And that way, when people ask me questions like, what's the best personal finance book to start with or something like that, there's a resource for them. And so that was the original idea for BookThinkers. Then we thought, let's build a mobile application where other people can log their biggest takeaways from the books too. Now, long story short, that mobile application did not come to fruition. But in anticipation of launching the app, I started to post really on social media about books every day, because I thought that if the app was to come live, I would have an audience to sell it to. So obviously, I was pretty bummed out when we really couldn't get the app off the ground, but something surprising happened. Authors started to reach out to me, and they'd offer to pay me to review their books. And that was an entirely new business model that I hadn't thought about. I didn't think about becoming a media agency or a marketing agency. But over time, I realized that I love personal development books, business books, nonfiction books. I love helping authors amplify their message. And so today, my business BookThinkers have actually got 10 people on the team, and we work with hundreds of authors a year to help them promote and market their books. We have a podcast, we've got large social media followings and everything like that. So it's very different than what I originally anticipated, but I've had such a fun time building it.
That's awesome how it evolved. I mean, you were promoting books anyway, and then it just turned into, well, hey, you can get paid to do. That's exactly what you're saying earlier. Get the money in for doing what you love that you were doing already, and also this idea of a community of people giving their feedback, what they got from the books directly. That's different to what we were saying earlier about trying to condense just the book. This is I dived into the whole thing, and this is what I got out of it, and having discussions around that is pretty cool.
Yeah, discussions around it. And I view myself and our social media as a book discovery mechanism. It's like I can give you a preview as to what this is going to look like and some of my favorite takeaways and who I think this book is for. And then it's up to you to read the book. I don't think I'm a good substitute for the book experience, because you can get so much from reading, and spending time with a physical book. Is that Rick Rubin's book that I see behind you?
Yeah, that one's there. That's awesome.
I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I did buy a copy.
Yeah, the creativity. There's a few there. What else is there? There's a lot of music ones. Yeah, no, it's not as it's pretty small shelf, but there's some classics on there. And you've written a book yourself?
Yeah, so my first book just came out. It's called Rise of the Reader: Strategies for Mastering Your Reading Habits and Applying What You Learn. And so over the years of building my community, I had hundreds and hundreds of people reach out to me with very similar questions like, hey, Nick, how do I get more from the books I'm reading? How do I choose the right books? How do I take good notes? How do I take action on the things that inspire me? Because, so many people read these books and they choose not to do anything with them, and then nothing happens. And so personal development becomes a form of procrastination or maybe even entertainment, not like real behavior change. So at first I was like, I wish there was a resource that I could just point people to so that I don't have to write a book. I'm definitely not much of a writer, but I spent 3 years sort of documenting my own process, the whole life cycle of choosing the right book to implementing it and everything in between. And this book, Rise of the Reader, is the result of that process. So it's really the first resource for people who they know books can help them close the gap between where they are and where they're going. They just don't really, they were never taught how to implement information. And so that's what I'm out here to solve for people.
Yeah, that's cool. A recent one was that I read was Atomic Habits,
That's a good
and
book.
yeah, even out of that, just the notion of habit stacking, which I've tried on this show, is I've really implemented that in terms of like introducing a new habit onto one that you already have in place, as opposed to like trying to just create a new habit out of nothing. It's like, well, if there's something you do already, put one on the back of it. And I've found that actually works. I mean, it's like you say, if you get one like tangible takeaway that you actually manage to implement, that's a cool thing.
That's success. That's how I define it as far as reading is concerned. You know, Napoleon Hill, again, back to Think and Grow Rich, he said, quote, action is the real measure of intelligence. And so it's not reading Atomic Habits that changes your life. It's habit stacking that changes your life. And there's another really cool concept from that book that I like to talk about on podcasts because it gives the audience an idea that they're capable of doing more and that they have agency. It's the idea that every single action you take today is a vote for the person you're becoming tomorrow, or think about it in 5 years. And so it's like, if you don't like your current reality, that's because the habits you had 4 or 5 years ago, they were bad. So you can change them today. And the result is the person you are in 5 years is very different. And you have agency, you have control over that. And so Atomic Habits is a great reminder for that.
You've got me going. You got me going back through the archives. The other one was the big one for me was The War of Art, Pressfield. I've
interviewed him a couple of times. I
oh,
love
have
him.
you? Oh, awesome. Yeah, just as a creative and the you know, sitting your ass where your heart is and stuff, and the keeping that relentless thing that tries to take you away from your focus, like keeping that at bay, and like just like a really
yeah
yeah.
he calls it resistance. He
Yeah.
actually we just had him on again the other day for my podcast because he just put out a new book called The Daily Pressfield. And this is really interesting because it's 1 page a day. You just read 1 page, and it's basically like a thought. What's the best way to put it? It's basically an essay on overcoming resistance every single day. It's a different thought, a different perspective, a way to take more control of your life. And it's just 1 page. So it's a really interesting read.
Again, like tangible bite-sized pieces, like manageable stuff, as opposed to like stuff that feels a little bit out of reach, perhaps. It's a tradition on the show to have guests, given their experience, offer some kind of challenge to the listeners. Given your personal journey, and is there anything that springs to mind?
Well, Daniel, sometimes people tell me, I appreciate that you love books so much, but I'm not much of a reader. I can't read books. I don't have time to read books. And so first I ask them this question. I say, if I paid you $10,000 or 10,000 euros to read a book by the end of the month, do you think you could do it? And that same person who just told me they had no time, they're like, I could read 5, right? So they've fallen into my trap. You know, it's not a question of whether or not we can read, but it's a question of whether or not we value the books enough to prioritize them in our calendar. And so here's my challenge for everybody. For the next month, read for 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Because here's how fast you can finish 2 books. If you read for 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening, that's 30 minutes a day. In 30 minutes, somebody who's just starting out, it's about 20 pages. Do that 5 days a week, you get 100 pages. The average book is only about 200 pages these days. I mean, The War of Art is much shorter than that. So you can read 2 books by replacing a little bit of social media in the morning and a little bit of Netflix in the evening with reading a good book. And that's my challenge for everybody.
That's an awesome one. Again, it's like tangible, small pieces. It reminds me something I've done. Just I was spending a lot of time on the road, getting my boy to school on this. They're doing works on this autobahn here. They're putting like a green roof on it, and it's kind of a bit of a, like, there's just traffic jams and stuff. And I was finding myself getting that traffic rage, and then I was like, hold on, how can you make this time more rewarding and more useful? And so I've been doing that, what you're saying, I've been putting books on. And so now I'm just like, hey, if I need to sit here for half an hour, at least I'm using this time to absorb that information, as opposed to just getting angry about the traffic. So for the listeners, like, that's just, it sounds simple, like it doesn't sound like it, but it's really helped me shift something that was frustrating to something that is now giving me exactly what you're talking about, the tools and resources and new ideas and concepts that are going to like move me forward. So yeah, just a shift in time. And I love that you said, yeah, knock a bit of social media off, knock a bit of Netflix off. Cumulatively over the year, it's a lot of pages, a lot of minutes.
Yeah, it's about 2 books a month. So you can read 24 books a year just by replacing a little bit of social media and a little bit of Netflix. And you know what's funny, whenever I mention this, is like, I'm not a robot. My wife and I, we watch a lot of TV and Netflix, and I work in social media full time, but I create this space because it's important for me to read and implement these books. People spend decades learning something, years writing about it. So you're condensing decades of somebody else's lived experience into days of consumption. It's like the greatest shortcut ever. There's a book for every problem that we have. I mean, we just talked about something as abstract as resistance, and the War of Art is there to help you overcome resistance. Like, don't stop your alarm clock, right? And Atomic Habits is here to help you habit stack. And so habit stacking, like, you have the habit of being in the car and getting into traffic, might as well stack it with reading a good book, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm interested, what are your thoughts on, do you deal with self-publishing at all? What are your thoughts around traditional publishing and self-publishing?
I don't deal with it much. I mean, I did just put out my own book. So it's not a service that my agency provides or anything, but I decided to self-publish because a number of reasons. One of the reasons that I didn't like school very much growing up was I was always a little bit rebellious. I didn't like being told what to do or how to think. And then, I had a full-time job out of school before starting BookThinkers. And again, same thing. I was always a little bit rebellious. I wasn't great with control and being told what to do and think, having to wait months for a decision to be made by somebody else when I could have made it in 2 seconds. The same thing with the book. When you traditionally publish a book, you lose control. The intellectual property is owned by the publisher. And so if you want to write a second edition, or if you want to turn the book into a course, or, there's so many things that become limited and you need it to be approved by other people because they've purchased the rights. So I decided to self-publish. But there are great companies out there that can help support self-published authors and make sure the book is very high quality, because that's the risk. You risk putting out a book that didn't go through the developmental editing and the proper spell checks and stuff like that if you self-publish a book, because Amazon made it available for everybody. It's print on demand. It doesn't cost anything. You just upload a Word file and all of a sudden people can buy it all over the planet. So it's amazing. Yeah, so I think I'm an advocate for self-publishing.
It's also brilliant in your case that were building this community already, so it's not like you were trying to, if you're in that position, you have people who may be interested. It's a great position to go the self-publishing route from.
Yeah, there's something that I've realized more and more over time, being a book promotion company, which is that most books are not differentiated enough from everything else that's out there. So sometimes people ask me, like, hey, Nick, do you think everybody should write a book? And I used to say yes, but now I say only if you have something unique to say, because a lot of things have already been said. like I mentioned earlier in the conversation, I wouldn't have written my book if there was another resource out there that could teach people how to read effectively, take great notes, and implement the information that they're learning. Right? One of the closest books out there is Atomic Habits, but it's not designed for reading about personal development books. It's designed for removing bad habits and, installing good ones. That has nothing to do with note taking or, building an accountability track or anything like that. So yeah, write a book if you have something really unique to say, and it's different than everything else that's out there.
Yeah, and that could be applied to many art forms, right? Like the point of
Sure.
view is unique. Yeah. I was just going to say on the school thing as well. I hear you on the school thing. The issue with school was that there was just not often a why. The why was missing. It was like do this, learn Pythagoras or whatever, but there was no why. If somebody had said, oh, perhaps maths like helps you understand like the language of the universe or whatever, I'd be like, oh, that might be it. But it was just like, why do I need to learn the sides of a triangle? There was no why with a lot of it. That's one of my kind of gripes about what's missing, I think, in the education system sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Most of my positioning against the public education system prior to you saying that has been around they discourage failure and they encourage conformity. So I grew up with a lot of fear and social anxieties, fear of failure, because I didn't want to be penalized for it. But then you get out in the real world and you realize that failure is everything. Failure is where all of the magic happens. It's where feedback happens. It's where constructive criticism takes place. It's where you iterate and get better at something. And so you shouldn't be scared of failure. But I love the idea that you're talking about there. There's no why. And I think that's a big piece of why I didn't love school either.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It makes sense. Yeah, it's a big one, just like that underpinning. Now, I'm a massive advocate for the failure, call it failure as well, like the growth that comes from the accelerated growth that comes from that is awesome. And also like, the ability to pivot and try things that you kind of like. It's easy to know what you don't like, right? But sometimes you need to try those things that you don't like to kind of move in the direction of what you do. Just, yeah, personally, there's been a lot of pivoting, a lot of call it failure, but I just more lessons than anything. Yeah, but it's just awesome that you have this wealth of knowledge from all this information you've consumed. You're now applying that in a usable way for others. It sort of all feeds itself. It's really inspiring to hear.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I thought of one other example. One of my mentors told me this recently. He said that, so he works in South Africa, and he told me that he worked with a group of students on day one after they came back to their second year of college, of school, of university, right? So they finish their second semester, they take their end of year testing, they all pass it, they get on to the next year. And on day one, he hands them the test back and they all fail it. And so it's like in the matter of a couple of months, they forgot everything that they had learned because school it's designed for short-term memorization, not application. And there is no why, like you said, too. So,
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, and there's like a muscle, it's like stuff needs to be worked. And as you said earlier on, the implementation part, it's okay to absorb all this stuff, but how do we actually implement it? So where can people find the site, and what's the process there? They can just register. Is there like free trials, or how does it work?
Well, today my business for authors, you could set up a discovery call. We could share with you the different services that we provide. Like I mentioned, that app that we wanted to build, it never really came to fruition. So today we're just a marketing agency that helps authors promote and market their books. If anybody in the audience is a reader and you're looking for book recommendations, head over to Instagram at BookThinkers. That's our biggest community. We have about, I think, 150,000 followers over there, and we post a new piece of content every single day. And so you can get introduced to all different types of personal development information over there. And there are links to our website and my book and all sorts of stuff over on Instagram.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate your time, and yeah, I'll check it out, and yeah, looking forward to watching it grow even more.
Thank you so much. Thank you.